Hi, good evening. Okay, so I think we're going to start now.
Right. All right, let me just. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another of our Soft and Life Skills Series webinar. My name is Karina Dice, and tonight, as you know, our webinar topic is dealing with our common fears, that's false evidence appearing real. Now, I have fears. You're here because I'm sure that, of the total number of persons here, 76, at least a majority of those persons must have some fears, and we're here to learn how to cope, how to handle these, and how to overcome them. And I'm excited for this discussion to see how it goes, and for our facilitator, Dr. Andrea Kanneh, to bring us through, with her expert knowledge. Now, before we jump into it, I just want to remind you of some housekeeping matters. So your mics will remain muted until the discussion portion. For right now, you can raise your hands to ask any questions, your virtual hands, by using the icon that you see. You can also type in the chat, any questions you have or comments or any clarification that you may need for anything that's being discussed. Also to be reminded that the session is being recorded, and so your audio or video will appear in the recordings if you should speak or should you turn your cameras on. But for now, I think we can jump into this webinar because we want to get things started. We want to get into the meat of the matter. So good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker. So Dr. Andrea Kanneh is an experienced and certified leadership and life coach. She aims to transform individuals, companies, schools, and communities by empowering individuals to produce groundbreaking results through the use of quality training and coaching. Her innovative and exciting instruction transforms the minds and lives of her clients. The areas of expertise for her and experience includes leadership and management coaching and training, life and empowerment coaching, project management, research ethics, and information technology. Her qualifications include her doctorate in ICT, a Master of Science in Research Ethics, a Master of Business Administration, Leadership and Life Coaching Certification, and Project Management Professional Certification. Now, based on this, she's well-equipped to bring us through tonight, well-equipped for us to come out as better persons after this entire session. So let's jump into this webinar, as we will basically be discussing, how do we get over these? How do we, get over the fear of embarrassment, fear of failure, the fear of abandonment, fear of being judged, the feeling that we're not good enough. And Dr. Kanneh is the most and best equipped person to help us through this. So looking forward to a great evening. I hope you all enjoy, and remember to raise your hands, type in the chat, and let us have a great discussion. Over to you, Dr. Kanneh.
Thank you, Karina, for that great introduction. Hi, everyone. How are you today? How are things going? You could type in the chat. You could just unmute and say it. Yeah? Okay, so for this webinar, you're going to need something to write on. There's a workbook. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now so you could access the workbook. Tell me when you're able to click on it and see it. Right, so click on the workbook. You can access that workbook. Now, you don't need to write on that. You could write on paper as well, right? This is an option. So if you're more comfortable writing in your notebook, that's okay too. It's going to be very interactive. We're going to be talking to each other right through. So just relax and enjoy. We're going to be dealing with common fears. How do we manage common fears? And when we say fears, we mean false evidence appearing real. As a young person, I was afraid to speak in public. I had my own fears. I used to shake and get all frazzled with it. And then at some point, I made a choice to not be afraid and to just do it. Now that I've done enough research and with time, I realized the steps that I went through, and that's what I'm presenting to you today. So steps that you could take to overcome common fears. We're going to go through a few things today. We're going to understand the concept of fear. And then we need to distinguish fear from, let's say, a big bad dog to the fear that we're speaking about today. False evidence appearing real. We're going to then look at a process and apply the process to manage your fears. Of course, when you leave a webinar, you want to take some kind of action. So we're going to make a promise or commitment to ourselves at the end of the webinar. Let's start by first looking at how you deal with fear now. So I want you to write one activity that actually triggers your fears right now. Write it in the workbook, or you can write it on your paper. What is one activity that triggers your fears? How do you feel when it's time to do that activity? Does your stomach hurt? Do you tremble? Does your heart beat fast? How do you feel? Uncertainty, yeah. And how do you currently deal with this fear? Okay, so does anyone want to share with us? So counseling, avoid it. Interesting ways. You overthink, then talk to yourself. Nice, yeah. Power through it. Pray, right? Use the script here, push through it. Okay, yeah. Slowly breathing. So I'm saying that you will have some good techniques. So what I'm going to introduce today is another technique that you could use along with your other techniques, right? So we sort of building the toolkit. So you're not going to throw out whatever you use. You're just going to look at another way that you could add to whatever you're using right now. So let's get into this. Let's define fear. So fear is an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. And that's the thing with fear, anticipation or awareness. Ooh, sorry to hear that, Chevelle. Something to note, though, is that fear is a natural emotion. And it's actually a functional emotion because fear has kept us alive, the human race, until now. So fear in itself is not bad. If you see a big bad dog coming at you, be afraid, So not all fear is harmful. But where fear can be a hindrance is when we're dealing with a perceived threat. So if I have to speak in public and I'm afraid of what might happen, that's when fear becomes a hindrance. So let's think about the effects of fear. Now, the effects of fear is really in the mind. Whatever causing that fear, the big bad dog or the fear of meeting new people, it's really in your mind. It originates there. And then it shows itself in your body. So what are some ways you experience fear? These are some here: increased heart rate, unexplained sweating, tightening of the jaw, numbed thought process. What about you? Type in the chat, what are some ways that you experience fear? You could also unmute your mic and speak if you want to speak. So I see sweating, crying, and worrying. Yeah. Tightening the chest. You have the chest. Jittery, sweaty palms, nervousness. Yes, yes. Anxious, you freeze, right? Yeah. Yes, you could unmute and tell me if you want to tell us. Yeah. And focus. Yeah, that's true. Procrastinate, put it aside, avoid it. Yes, yes, yeah. So the thing about it is that it all starts in the mind. And then it shows its effects on our body. So the mind can't really differentiate fear of speaking from fear of that big bad dog. It just know that fear, fear, fear. And then it does its thing, the body. Okay, you're not allowed to unmute right now. Okay, okay. So probably we could unmute them and allow them to just tell us what they experience. Yeah, let me hear from you all. Can you speak now? Karina, could they speak?
Can.
Yeah?
Yes, we can.
Okay, nice. Okay, so let me hear from you all. So you all typed already. So some of you typed, but those who might have wanted to tell us, how do you experience fear?
My heart is just response, and in my mind, somebody that's just talking to me, telling me that.
Yeah, yeah. So hearing that voice to be afraid, sort of thing. Yeah, that's common as well.
I would get anxious at times.
I can imagine. Yes, yes. That's a common response as well. Yeah. Right. So we have different ways that we respond to fear. But let's distinguish one fear from the next. So there are two types of fear. There's situational fear, and this is in your workbook, you can write it in. And situational fear is the fear of being triggered, right? It's fear that's being triggered by an immediate threat in our current situation. So situational fear is walking down a dark alley and seeing three big figures coming towards you. Right? That is like fear that is actually happening, immediate threat. But then there's the psychological fear. And that's the main focus today. Fear that is unconnected from any concrete and true immediate danger. It is always fear of something that might happen. So that's key. The anticipation of a threat versus the fact that the threat is actually there. Right? So we have two types of fear. Who could tell me the two types of fear?
Situational and psychological.
Nice. Okay. So situational and psychological. And our focus today is more on the psychological fear because that's the perceived threat. So that psychological fear, we could call it that false evidence appearing real. And let's see why we have these things. Like, how does it come up? The psychological fear. How does the brain even know about it? So let's see how it is, right? First, we have to understand false evidence. So these days we have a lot of fake news. You'll ever hear fake news?
Yeah.
A bunch of false evidence. Yeah. So some things are widely believed to be true, but in fact are not correct. Something that is common to all of us is the concept of the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. Yeah. Okay. So I saw a request to repost the workbook. Right hands. Okay, nice. Right, so the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. Does the sun really move, you all? Does it really move up and down around the earth like that?
No, it doesn't.
No, right? So the earth revolves around the sun. But even if we know it, we still think sunrise and sunset. So that's an example of an accepted false evidence. It's not real, but we don't question it. We just accept it as is so. So false evidence appearing real is not always triggered by the truth. Most times when we're looking at false evidence appearing real or this type of psychological fear, we're looking at our belief system. It's tied to our belief system. So then you might ask, what is a belief system? The beliefs are thoughts that we keep thinking. That's our belief system. So it's habitual thoughts that we keep thinking. How do we get them? As a baby, we might hear no and yes enough times to believe certain things are right and certain things are wrong. We go to school, we see ways that people behave and being rewarded for, ways that they misbehave and not being rewarded for. We work in a workplace and we see some people, again, being rewarded for certain types of behaviors, some not. And we keep building this program in our brain of what is okay, what is not okay, based on our experience in life, based on other things that we hear from other people, and it becomes a habitual thought pattern. Now, this doesn't mean that it's true. So someone might tell you you're too slow all of your life, and after a while you accept it. But it doesn't mean that it is so. It means that you have accepted that someone says this and you think it's true. We don't go through that kind of thought process. Unfortunately, we sort of just accept. And as children, we accept what we were told. Right? So belief systems are habits. But after a while, belief systems, you don't even know you're doing it. It becomes invisible like the sunset and sunrise. You just accept. So what is a habit? Look at the second one here, because this is the true meaning. An acquired mode of behavior that has become nearly or completely involuntary or unconscious. You stop even knowing that you're doing it. It's an unconscious pattern of behavior. I'm going to share a video of how we learn, because that is how habits are created. So we learn these belief systems and we learn fears, right? Fears are some things that we actually learn.
No, let's get me back 30. You know it's on $25.
Remember to mute, remember to mute.
220, you're coming to nearly 220. You're bringing $10, telling me you are 225. You
Okay, right. So let me share a video with you all.
What's going on in the brain when you learn? In order to learn anything, whether it's math, a foreign language, guitar, or how to dribble a basketball, you need to create and strengthen pathways in your brain. Think about shooting a free throw. Know that feeling when you've got it down and don't even have to think about it? That's muscle memory. Here's the thing. Muscle memory lives in the brain, not the muscles. Your brain controls everything your muscles do, and it does this by activating specific neural pathways for each and every movement. These are functional pathways, neurons working together to achieve a goal. Say you're learning how to shoot a free throw. If it's your first time doing it, you don't yet have a pathway for that movement in your brain. You need to create it. Let's use an analogy to look at what's happening in the brain during this time. When you're first learning, your brain is like a forest full of trees and dense foliage, with no clear pathway between point A and point B. As you learn the mechanics of shooting a free throw, you create a trail through the forest. Now you can shoot the free throw because you've created that pathway in your brain, but you probably don't make many shots because it's so new. The pathway isn't very clear yet. In order to improve your free throw, you need to refine and strengthen the free throw pathway in your brain. The way you do that is through practice. Practice gradually widens the trail through the trees, turning it into a dirt road between A and B. You're starting to get pretty good now. You're making more free throws than not. You don't have to think about the mechanics as much. That's because the pathway gets stronger after each practice rep. And you've done a lot of reps. With even more practice, the dirt road turns into a paved road connecting A and B, allowing information to be transmitted at a faster rate. Now you're a 70% free throw shooter, and when you step up to the line, you don't even have to think about it. Eventually, with enough practice, what started as a trail has become a full-blown highway. Now you're a master, draining almost every free throw, and the movement is completely second nature. Scientists call this plasticity, and it's your brain's innate ability to create and strengthen connections between neurons.
Okay, so what did you gather from the video with respect to the fears and we learn psychological fears? What are some connections you can make? Because psychological fears are fears that we learn. And with enough practice over time, what does that video tell you? With enough practice over time, what happens with these psychological fears? You can type it in the chat. Right, they are formed over time, yeah? And what else? Look at this here. In terms of the words on the slide, they become unconscious patterns of behavior. So while learning your timetables is something good and something that you want to encourage, learning fears is also something that happens. So we learn how to be afraid. We learn the things to be afraid of. Right? So let's continue. So the video shows that we build a muscle or we build connections in the brain showing us how to be afraid. It's practiced over time. Do it over and over again and it gets better. Yeah, it gets better and unconscious. So it works well for us sometimes with some types of learning, but it can work against us with some types of learning as well, right? Because learning happens. So we either learning the right thing or learning the wrong thing. Either way, we're learning. These are some of the common fears that people say that they have. Fear of not fitting in, fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of embarrassment, sometimes fear of talking to a new person or interacting with your team, fear of speaking in front of a crowd, fear of abandonment by friends, by family, fear of messing up something so that you're afraid to speak because you don't want to mess it up, fear of being judged or fear of being bullied. Any of you experience any of these, or if not, even different ones? What are some of the fears that you experience? The psychological fears that you perceive that might happen. Failure, right? 9 out of the 10. 9 and 10. Okay, yeah. Rejection, right? And these are perceived threats. You're seeing that? Fear of messing up, yeah. 10 out of 10. Okay, yeah. 2, right. So we all experience it. No one's spared from it. The good news is that because it's a learned behavior, we could learn new behavior. That's the good news. It would take some time, right? But it's something that we learn. So that's a good thing. It's not something that we're born with. So naturally, we're not born with this. It's something that we learn over time and we could learn a new habit. Now, how does this come up? What is how does it originate? So we have 4 ways we're going to look at in terms of how fear shows up or builds up in your life. And fear here is the psychological false evidence appearing real. Yes, fear of being successful is a natural fear as well. Yeah, for sure. That is. So the first one is self-limiting behavior. Have you ever found yourself making excuses as opposed to doing what you have to do? I'm way too old for this now. It seems hard. Nobody will like it anyway. Yeah? So this fear shows up as self-limiting behavior. You wouldn't think it's fear, but it's you protecting yourself from not having to experience failure. So you make an excuse. Right. Believe that your abilities here are so not willing. You believe here that your abilities are fixed. So you're not willing to look at possibilities of growth. You're sort of seeing yourself as in a box and not willing to come out of that box. Right? So this self-limiting behavior, you wouldn't call it fear. You might just call it staying in my box, something like that, or staying in my zone. But this is fear. This is fear of you trying something different, coming out of your comfort zone, because in your mind, you might not be able to do it. I see somebody typing there that failure is a good thing, and yes, it is. As a baby, we fell a few times before we could walk and get balance. So in failing to walk, that is how we were able to get this concept of balance and start walking. But as adults, somehow we think that failure suddenly is a bad thing, that we must get it right the first time. Right? So somewhere along the line that showed up. The second way that fear could show up is making assumptions against yourself. So an example is a teacher, you might have your hand up and a teacher might not call you. So in your mind, the teacher doesn't like you. Or you might be walking through the mall and somebody you know passed you straight. In your mind, that person passed you straight. Now, you don't know that the person was thinking about something else. Or they might have been concerned about something. So you jump into conclusions and making snap judgments about people don't like you. But the problem is, it's not just that person didn't like you or the teacher didn't like you. Suddenly you start saying all people don't like you. Right? So this is one way where we work against ourselves in building fears. So we can say we're making assumptions about ourselves, right? Against ourselves. And the thing about it is that you're sure they're true, eh? You see our highlight show? You're sure that that person doesn't like you because they passed you straight. Now the person never saw you. Right, yeah, it is a normal emotion. Right, so it's normal. And again, remember this, fear is a natural emotion, but it becomes a hindrance when the perceived threat pulls us back. So you're correct to see that, right? Another way that fear shows up is when you start parroting other people's thoughts. So we'll see this a lot in young people who haven't really come into themselves sort of thing yet, where they just go through life parroting parents or the teachers or anyone in authority, where they think that whatever that person said is the truth about them. So someone might say, people like us don't succeed in business. And you just jump on and start saying it without even examining it. Right? That's when they start parroting people's thoughts. It could work in a good way too, where you say that our family will always succeed. So that's a nice thing too. So it can work for or against you. But the problem here is that you're not thinking, you just sort of going with what others have said and assuming that it is so. How do you know when you're parroting someone's thoughts? You will have things like words like should, I ought to do this, and I need to do this. I should do this. When you find yourself saying those sort of words all the time, most times it's because someone put it in your mind that this is how it's done without you questioning it, right? So that's one way for you to see if you're being triggered by other people versus thinking on your own. The last way that fear will show up is reruns. So we have thoughts going through our mind right through the day. And sometimes we attend or focus to certain thoughts. And we might be, today, being Wednesday, be walking around thinking about what happened on Monday, instead of living in the moment of today. Right? So reruns could stop us from enjoying the full moments because, again, we're limited by that replay that's going through our mind. Listen to the things you're telling yourself, right? So that's one way to catch it. Listen to the things you're saying to yourself so that you will know if it's a rerun or if it's happening now. Right? So those are the 4 ways. I'm going to test you to see if you understand the 4 ways. So this is an example of a character called Henry. Henry hates his job with its lack of responsibility and low salary. So Henry spends whole day, every day, anytime you meet Henry's going to tell you about how awful that job is and what he'd prefer to do. Henry doing this now 10 years. Right? So 10 years, Henry doing this. Anytime you see Henry saying the same thing over and over. However, he has not done anything to change his situation. You know any Henrys? People who complain and day in, day out, same situation? Yeah? Okay, yeah. I see a few of you know Henrys. And there might be a little Henry in each of us, right? In some dimension of our life, but we know a few Henrys for sure. So now you're going to tell me, where would Henry fall? What do you think? What might be affecting Henry that Henry not willing to make a change? Because this happens to many of us, huh? Self-limiting behavior for sure. It could be that Henry feels that he's just not good enough to apply for a new job, yeah? Other people's thoughts for sure. Other people might be in work complaining with Henry, giving Henry ammunition. Yeah? So again, these fears don't show up as I am afraid. It shows up in your behavior. So like Henry wanted change, but was not willing to go for the change because of fear. Henry will never tell you I'm afraid of change. He will say things like, I'm too old for that. That's not for me. It's safer where I am. Right? But that is fear. That's the same psychological fear. What Henry is doing Henry is standing on the left circle. Henry is standing on the right circle. So let me explain this diagram to you. Where we are right now is the present. So we think we are on this right circle. On the left circle. Right? So we think we are in the present on the left circle. And the left circle is what is happening. You all see in the left circle? Yes, no? So the left circle is the present moment. And this is where we think we are right now. Even as we sit in, we're thinking we are in the present moment listening to this webinar. But the reality is many of us really in the left circle. The left circle is where we're hearing the presenter, but we're worried about what's going to happen in the future. What we're going to eat tomorrow, what time we have to get up. Or we in the right circle here, thinking about the past. What happened yesterday? Right? So the left circle is where we want to be, but most times we're in the right circle. You'll understand what I just said? So let me say it again, because I think I mix up my left and right. So the left circle is the present, and the left circle is where we want to be, where we want to have our conversations. But the right circle is where we tend to be, where we never just fully present to the moment. We're thinking about what's happening tomorrow. We're thinking about what happened in the past. And that's where Henry was, in the left circle. So instead of Henry jumping to the right and looking at his options, Henry was stuck in the left circle. Do you understand this concept? Give me a yes, no. Let me see it in the chat, yeah? All right. Nice, okay. So we need to change Henry's belief to our own belief system. So beliefs, we need to, you all see how a table might have like 4 legs? We need to pull out a leg from the table to make the table unstable. And that's the same thing we need to do with our beliefs. We need to introduce new evidence so that our brain could relearn. If we don't introduce new evidence, the brain will just accept the old things as the truth. So we need to identify alternative beliefs that are more empowering. So Henry could look at his skills. He doesn't have to fake it and say, I don't like this job, so therefore changing one tomorrow. No, he doesn't have to do that. He has to say, why don't I like this job? And what can I do to improve myself? So you all see how Henry could go on to the left side on the present moment and see himself and what could change in his life, right? That's where we have to with fears. We can't treat fears from the right side. All things that happen, we need to come to the present moment in fear. We ask ourselves questions. Could this limiting belief that I'm not ready to move be a wrong thing I'm assuming? Is there more to this story? So Henry might have heard of other people who left their job and end up without a job. But only when Henry moved to that present moment on the right circle, Henry could realize, okay, this is what I've been thinking. I've been fooling myself in terms of what others experience, and I have to live my life. Right? Always ask yourself, what is an alternative explanation? I'm going to introduce you to a model to manage your fears. Remember the fear that you had from the start? We could work this with this model. This model has 5 steps. We're going to identify the activity we're going to do. We're going to look for the reason, the real reason we're doing that activity. We're going to identify the fears that show up or the false beliefs. We're going to stand on the left circle and assume an empowering belief. And then we're going to prepare to act and act. So let's go through this. So take a breath. You ready? Give me a yes. So you're going to flip our fears, right? Let me see you all type in the chat. Yeah? Okay. So you could write in your workbook or you could write in your notebook. Let's go through. The first step is to identify the activity to do. What we have to do and think, okay, we have to do this mountain of task, this big task. The reality is that this big task is a set or a series of activities. So we need to look at the smaller steps that are more manageable than this big task in front of us. So what I have here on this slide is a work breakdown structure. We use that in project management. So let's say, for example, I have to conduct this webinar. What is the activity to be done? Conduct the webinar, but that's too much. That's a big deal. Can it be broken down into parts? Yeah. I could prepare the webinar, I could rehearse my presentation, and then I could present. So suddenly now this big task, you see the ladder on the side? It's now smaller tasks, more manageable. And now I have to say, okay, what part of this activity is triggering the fears? The false evidence? It might not be preparing the webinar. It might not be rehearsing. It might be presenting the webinar. So suddenly now I know exactly what is triggering the fear. So look at the first thing that you wrote in terms of something that triggers your fear and break it down. What is the exact part of it that triggers your fear? Is it arriving at the place? Is it stepping onto the stage? What is the exact part? Right? So that each step broken down becomes more manageable. Any questions on this? I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. No? Okay then. All good? Okay. So now the next step now is, what is your reason for doing this activity? Now, I could just on the surface say, oh, because I have to do it. But I want to know the real reason you're doing it. Why did you get yourself in this situation? And most times it's a really good reason, and it's just that we forgot. So for work, you might say, because it's required for my work duties. And I'll say, but why? Why? And then you'll say, let's say as a teacher or a caregiver, because I want to provide a certain standard of care. So suddenly now we get into the real thing. Why? Because I want to make a difference in the students' life, in the children's lives. Why? Because I love these children and their care is important. So suddenly now the reason that you're doing the activity is because you love these children and their care is important. You see what I'm saying here? So first, when we see that fear triggering activity, we need to understand why we're doing it. And most times we have a really good reason that we're doing it. We don't walk in here. We're there because we know that is something that we really want to do, some really deep reason. Let's look at another example for students. Students, why they're doing something is because it's required for my assessment. Okay, but why are you doing it? Because I want to get good grades. Okay, but why I want to get great grades? To go deeper. Because I want to make a difference in my life and the lives of others. So what you're seeing there is that we need to examine that reason. Go deep. First step was break it down. The second step, that activity that triggers the fear, know why you're doing it. Know your true purpose for doing it. Right? So we're standing on something solid. Now, this is there, be aware of it for you to be able to deal with it. We can't ignore it, right? So awareness is key. What is the feeling? What is the belief that triggering this fear thought? Is it that people like us shouldn't do it? Is it that no one in the family was ever good at this? So something is triggering you. What I want you to do in this stage is recognize that you're standing on the right circle. That's really key. That circle where you have a lot of worry about the past, worry about the future, regret about the past. Right? You must understand that. The next stage here in our 5-step model is to identify a new empowering belief. So this new empowering belief is where you're standing in the present. And you're asking yourself, what if I could do it? What if I could take it step by step and just go through the process? Now, again, you're not lying to yourself here. You're opening up possibilities for yourself. Any questions on this step? No? Okay, no questions. Okay, you're good? Yeah, yeah. Good so far? So step one was break it down and identify your activities. And in that activity, identify the one that's causing the fear. Step two, understand why you're doing it. The real reason for it, right? Not just the on the surface reason. Step three, what is that fear telling you? What is the lie that fear telling you? Step four, replace that lie with the truth. What if you could do it? What if you could learn? So what if you make a mistake? And then step five, act. But action by itself is not good enough. We need to prepare to act, then we act. Right? So we need to prepare ourselves. Not because we say, okay, it was a lie that I was believing, let me go do it. No, you need to still prep, right? You still need to prepare yourself because confidence is influenced by preparation. So prepare for the success that you're claiming. Act knowing that you're prepared. And what is key in this stage, and I want you to write it down, build an evidence journal. So have a little notebook where you write down all the successes. But not just the success, just how you felt. I want you to even capture that feeling of success. Right? So you want to capture the feeling behind the success and the success itself. Why do we want this? Days when you feel like you really can't handle it, go back to that evidence journal. That's your life. That's proof. Right? So you're going to prove to yourself each time that you're very well capable. Right? So those are the 5 steps. Step 1, identify the activity. Step 2, what is your reason for doing it? Step 3, identify false belief. Identify an empowering belief. And step 5, prepare. That's important. And then act. So I'm going to take you through some examples, but I want you to work on an example on your own while I'm going through these examples. Right? Because I want you to actually work, coming out of this webinar, I want you to have a strategy. So I want this to be a working webinar. So on your sheet of paper, look at the activity that you were afraid of at the start, and let's work it together, right? Using the examples that I'm showing you. Here. I got permission from some of the teens to use this. So this teen had leadership tryouts. And year after year, this teen would miss the tryouts because she didn't feel like she should even try, that she wasn't ready for it. So what is the reason for you doing this tryout? If I just say, because everybody else doing it, I mightn't get that build up of force or energy to really try. So she was digging deep, and what she came up with as her reason is the fear of being rejected. Right? So the reason for doing it is to show other people it's possible. Right? So her whole reason here is to show people that this is very much possible. Are you hearing me? I'm going to move back to where we were. So let's just recap the 5 steps while these slides load. 1, identify your activity, break it down to the specific activity. 2, identify your reason. 3, identify the fears. 4, identify the truth. 5, prepare to act and then act. Right, so write down what's happening there.
Dr. Kanneh, I think we lost you. At least your mic is muted.
Okay, you all, sorry about that. Right, so did you write down your activity? Right, did you write down the activity? Yes, no? Right, so go back to the start when you had that activity. I want you to break down that activity into the parts and see which part really scaring you. Then I want you to look at the particular activity and see why is it that you're doing this activity. Next, I want you to write down the fear that is triggered with this activity. Go to the truth in terms of what other belief you could replace this empowering belief with. And then you're going to say how to act, right? So this is where we were. She wanted to try out for leadership. She didn't feel she could. But then when she thought about it, if she did it, then she could be the light for others to show them that whatever they want to do is possible. She identified the fear, that it was a fear of being rejected or not being good enough. And then she had to ask herself the question, do you see that this is a belief? It's not a real threat. It's a perceived threat. Having asked her that question, you'll see the slide that I'm seeing? The slide with the example? Yes?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good. Okay, nice. Right. So having seen that threat, then she was able to identify an empowering belief. So for a teen, it might be, I have nothing to lose. Or anything is possible, and we will never know until we try. So what she did was prepared, went through the interviewing process, and was very successful. Let's look at another example. Performing in front of others. And a lot of us go through this process here, go through this fear. When we break it down and look at why we do what we do, it could be something like this. So that I could gain confidence to go on stage, or I see this as my future career, so it's something that I want to master. When we look at the fear, it might have been fear of humiliation. And then the key part here is recognizing that this is just a fear. That's key. Right? That's the key thing. Recognize that it's a belief. The empowering belief to replace it with was, I have no reason to be afraid once I trust in my skills. So what did this person do? Rehearse for weeks and did it well. So I want you to write down your process in terms of your activity. What is there for you to do? Break it down to steps for me. Just use this example on the slide here to help you. That one activity that kind of bringing out that fear in you, false evidence appearing real. Why are you doing that activity? What's the real reason for doing it? What is the greater good? Next step, what is the belief or the false belief that is holding you back from that one activity? What is limiting your greater good? Because you know it's for your greater good. What is holding you back? What is the thought or belief that holding you back? Some people might say, I don't know enough. I'm too young. I'm too old. Different things you might have. Those twos, I'm too this, I'm too that. I'm not enough of this, I'm not enough of that. So then the next step is ask yourself, is this the truth or is this a belief? Meaning, am I standing on the right circle where I have a bunch of beliefs, or am I standing on the left circle that in the present moment? Most times you would see it's a belief. It's a belief. So then let's jump across to the left circle. How can I empower myself? Knowing that this is just a belief, what is a new belief that I could use? So let me leave you to come up with a belief there. If you get in trouble with a belief, you could say, what if? What if I try? What if I take one step? Right? So what if I can? Because sometimes it's so trained into you to have this belief, it's hard to flip it. Right? But you could just take that one step. What if I'm willing to believe that this is not the truth? Once I have prepared the work, the fear is reduced. Very good, yeah. So then you prepare one step at a time. So Mel Robbins had this thing where she said 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to break the focus and just do it. That's one way to interrupt the thoughts and just do it. But then you could also say, what if? What if I can? And just go for it. Right? So we need to replace the lie or the false belief with something that is true. And the fact is that as babies, it's like it's a blank slate. And when we grow up, we put these beliefs, we condition to think these beliefs. So the reality is that there is no real belief. We just have to be willing to look at other ways of seeing it. This is another example with somebody who plays sports and needs to interact with people. So it might be going to a new job. You need to interact with people and you're really scared about it. But when you think about it, why is it that you want to do this step? It's never because I have to do it. That is not an empowering way to look at it. Always go down to your deep whys. So he knew that talking to his teammates made sense because chemistry is important for a winning team. When you look at why you don't want to talk, what is the fear? What is the belief that being triggered? That people might reject me if I'm different? Then ask yourself, is this the truth or is this a belief? Most times it's a belief. So then, what is the empowering thought here? In his case, I'm okay just as I am. There's really nothing that could go wrong. In terms of real, it's more about perceived threats. So he just started to speak to others and he was okay. Now, you're going to get resistance, y'all. You're going to get resistance in this process because we have this thing called cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is the term for the state of discomfort felt when two or more belief systems contradict or oppose each other. This is going to happen anytime you learn something new, because we saw the video on the brain. We have a highway that paved out, and now we're going against that highway. We seem to be paving a new road, a new neural network. So we're going to get some discomfort. And the thing about it is that discomfort is a good thing. It shows that you're learning, right? So when your conditioning from your childhood contradicts your new positive beliefs about yourself, you're going to feel some discomfort coming out of that comfort zone. That is a good thing, because it means that you're actually feeling or moving towards something different, right? So love yourself through it. Something else that you're going to find in terms of resisting change is making excuses. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm not good enough for it. And you're going to believe in these excuses, because an excuse is justification to yourself for why you are not doing something or failure to keep a promise. Right? So you're going to believe in your own excuse. And then you could check yourself and see that it just might be a self-limited belief or I'm parroting someone else. All of that going to happen. This is natural resistance to change, and know that it's okay. Give yourself the grace of that it's okay. Allow yourself to feel the discomfort. I've heard someone say this, and it's really good. I wanted to capture it here, but I didn't get the name of the person. Replace hope for change with action for change. It's not enough to have it in your head. You need to actually do. So the journey begins now, y'all. A single step. That's all you need to actually move from this fear to a state of freedom. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. So these are our 5 stages here. Identify the activity. One foot in front of the other, exactly. Examine the real reason for doing it, your reason. Identify the fears or false beliefs. Identify a new empowering belief, and then prepare to act, and then act. Let me just see by a sign of hands who are willing to try this. Willing to try a method. So now you're not going to replace what you're doing if it's working for you, right? You're just going to add it to what you're doing. Yeah? I see people, okay, nice. I see people willing to try it. Very good. Right, again, you're going to get resistance, and that's okay. Resistance is okay, right? Don't ever put down yourself for resistance. That's just the mind changing things. So I've heard people say, instead of false evidence appearing real, face everything and rise. So anytime you get fear, flip it to face everything and rise for the word fear. Let's make our promise, because you went through all of this, but I can't let you leave it out planning and action. So I want you to make a promise to yourself today. Today, so I'll do like this. May the 11th, I, Andrea Kanneh, promise that when fears sneak in, because fears would sneak in, you all, it's not that you will say, oh, I'm going to be afraid now. They just come. But when the fears come, I'm going to stop and recognize that I'm standing on the right circle. I'm going to identify the activity that is triggering the fears, examine my real reason for doing this activity, my bigger or greater reason for it. Identify that false belief. And instead of staying on that right circle with the false belief, I'm going to recognize that it's there and ask, is this true? Was I born that way? No. So I'm going to jump to the right circle and come up with an empowering belief. Then I'm going to prepare to act, because preparation is key. And then we're going to act. So what is your commitment to yourself, y'all? I want to hear somebody probably say the promise to me. Let's just get about 2 people saying the promise so that we could probably unmute so that we could have people say the promises. Yeah. So who wants to say the promise? I know some people had their hands before. So those who had their hands up, and I'd ask you to raise your hands. If you're not planning to say the promise, you could probably put down your hand, right? Okay, so let's call on people who wants to go. So Miss Cadogan, you want to read out the promise? Jemiah?
I, Jemiah Owen, promise that when fears sneak in, I will identify the activity that is triggering these fears, examine my real reason for doing this activity, identify the fears or false belief, identify a new empowering belief to replace the old belief, prepare to act, then act.
Thank you, Jemiah. Christina?
I, Christina, promise that when fear sneaks in, I will identify the activity that is triggering these fears, examine my real reason for doing this activity, identify the fears or false belief, identify a new empowering belief to replace the old belief, prepare to act, then act.
Thank you, Christina. Keisha?
I, Keisha Frederick, promise that when fear sneaks in, I will identify the activity that is triggering these fears, examine my real reason for doing this activity, identify the fears or false belief, identify a new empowering belief to replace the old belief, and prepare to act, then act.
Thank you, Keisha. One more, Faith.
You right? Or the other Faith?
Faith Alexander, yeah.
I, Faith Alexander, promise that when fears sneak in, I will identify the activity that is triggering these fears, examine my real reason for doing this activity, identify the fears or false belief, and identify a new empowering belief to replace the old belief, and prepare to act and act.
Thank you so much, yeah. Okay, so then what is your commitment to yourself? All of you, so I'm seeing Narisha and Parvati. What is your commitment to yourself? From 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. What is your commitment to yourself to trying these steps? Because coming to the webinar is not enough. Actually committing to yourself. So don't know. I can't pronounce your name. You probably need to pronounce it for me. So you could unmute. Donarisha, yeah? What is your commitment to yourself? So see Narissa, 10, right? Yeah. Christina, what is your commitment to yourself?
For me, it's a 10. And yes, I know that just coming and listening to the webinar it's not only that, but it's a big step because it's identifying that you need to be courageous and brave to face your fears. So for me, it's a 10 because it's very important so that it can unblock some of the opportunities.
Very true. Right? And a lot of times now, things that we were just taken for granted as the truth, examine and see if it's the truth or if it's a belief. Right? So that's really good. And thanks, Christina, for sharing. So we're going back to the first slide where I'd ask you to look at an activity. How do you feel? What are your options? So I'm asking you now, has anything changed since we first started the webinar to now? This is how we started, right? Where you had an activity to identify that triggered the fear. How do you feel when you go through that activity or when it happens? And I ask you what you currently do. You'll say things like pray and stuff and don't stop. If what you're doing helps you continue, but do you see other options as well that you could add to what you're doing? Do you see other options that you could add? Yeah? Right, so going back to that first slide. Yes, you could add the steps, right? So who could tell me the 5 steps? Let me see if you all remember the 5 steps. You could raise your hand and tell me. Okay, Christy?
I identify the activity that is triggering the fear, examine the real reason for the fear, replace the old fear with a new belief, prepare to act, and then act.
Right. So identify the activity, break it down, identify the real reason, identify the exact fear, that exact belief that kind of holding you back, recognize it's not real, and replace that belief with something that is true, and then act. So very good, Chrissy. Right. So now I want you to do this quick survey. For me, it's going to take less than 1 minute. And I want you to, while you're doing it, you can tell us some key takeaways that you had. So look on the chat. There's a link to the form. Key takeaways from the webinar. Right, so you all have the form. Let me give you a minute. You could add your email to the mailing list for like other webinars that are coming up. So Dreaming Big is coming up in June, and we have a leadership workshop in July. Right, so you could add your name and your email address to the form itself. Yes, please share key takeaways in the chat, you all. Key takeaways, please share them. You could even say it, right? So you could unmute and say a key takeaway as well. Right, so changing beliefs, and that's key. Nice. Okay then, okay, no problem. Removing fears, wow, yeah. Wow, very good, you all. Chunking the activities, nice. Living in the present, very good. Mute negative self, but recognize it, right? So don't mute it, recognize it and see it as a lie. Because if you try to hold it back, it will always be there. You want to recognize your negative self-talk and see that it's a lie. Accept growth, right? Nice. I like what you all saying here.
So what were you called one with the other four?
Christina, I see you have your hand raised.
Could you go back to the slide that gave the tips as to how to, or steps, how to deal with it? Because you said about recognize, please, thanks.
Yeah, the steps. Okay, let me bring it up.
How to address it.
So let's see which one that might be. Not this, right? You want more details? The one that was more detailed?
Yes, ma'am. The one that was more detailed, yeah.
Okay. This one?
Okay. All right. This one is good.
And there's the one with the image. I could bring up that after with the steps here. Right. So you'll have some good, I've seen some good things in terms of the learning. That's really good. So again, you all recognize the fear, right? And recognize it for what it is, a false belief. Don't try to hide it or cover it up. Recognize it. And in recognizing it, you could see that this is not the truth and come up with the truth. So it was this slide. You want me to move to the next one? Or you still looking at this one?
You can move to the next one.
Okay, the next one was this one.
Okay.
Yes, now I'm bringing it up. This one? So it's the same thing. This to me, the other one had a little more information.
Same thing. Okay, it's the same.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, okay. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for those who were behind the scenes helping me with the chats and managing the webinar. What I hope today is that you got a message that could really help you. Something that you could actually take and work with, right? That is key. Don't leave here just thinking it was nice. Put it into action, try it on. You don't have to get rid of what you do. You could continue doing what you do and more. So thanks so much for coming out tonight, and look out for the upcoming webinars, right? So leave your contact for me to email you with the upcoming webinars. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Kanneh. That was a very informative discussion. I mean, I learned a lot, you know, basically just apply this 5-step model. It's not about getting information, but putting it into action. So that's a takeaway for tonight, everyone. At this point, if you have any additional questions, you can either type it in the chat or you can raise your hand to ask a question or to make a comment. But just to let you know that the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. It's UA Alumni Online, and that will be accessible by Friday of this week, or you can email me. I'll put that email address in the chat for a direct link to that recording should you need to share it or to go over some of the material. But while we're waiting questions or anything, just want to say, you know, a thank you to Dr. Kanneh. I'm seeing where the persons in the chat, the participants are very appreciative of the information that you have shared. And we are also appreciative at the UA for the time you took to share this information with us. It's critical to not just our group, but to the persons around us. Because if we're better, then we influence other people to be better as well. I'm not seeing any questions at this moment. But you can get in contact with Dr. Kanneh. Her information is at the bottom of the slide, youthlivingcourageously@gmail.com, and her telephone number is also there should you need to ask questions off air. Well, that was a good webinar. Thank you all so much for joining. Good night, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Have a great evening and all stay very safe. Until next time, bye and thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was so good. Bye.
Thank you too.
Bye. Thanks. Bye. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Hi, good night, Dr. Kanneh. Beautiful presentation as always. Take care.
Thanks. Thanks so much. Good night, you all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much, Dr. Kanneh.
Okay. You're welcome. Thanks. Good night, Javel.
Good night, Dr. Kanneh.
Good night.
Wonderful presentation. Learn a lot. So you know I'm going to call you and ask you for some PowerPoints. Copies of your PowerPoints.
Okay.
Okay, you'll meet. God
Okay,
bless.
yes. Okay, good night. Bye. Okay, then so I think the room is going to be closed, but thanks again so much for coming out. Yeah, and you could always contact me if you need information.
Bye, Miss.
Thanks, Shaman. Okay, bye-bye, Faith. Okay, Karina, so I think what, I leave now or we leave now?
Yes, you can. I'm just continuing to monitor the chat just in case.
Oh, okay, let me wait soon. Let me hang on and just in case.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have any question that you want to ask. Joanne? Hi, Joanne. Geraldine? Oh. What's the contact? So the contact is so that's the WhatsApp contact, if that's what you're looking at. And the email I'm just going to paste it. Control C. All right, so that's the contact and the email. Okay. Any other questions? I see some people there. You could put on your video. Probably you could put on your video if you had questions or anything like that. No? Okay then. Yeah. Thanks again for coming. Bye, Shaman.
All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now.
Yes, okay then.
Right.
Thanks again, Bruno.
Thank you too. Have a good